Protomartyr, Formal Growth in the Desert, album review, let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Detroit post-punk and art punk band Protomartyr, who have been a band favorite of mine for quite some time. Very many years ago, I was introduced to them. I kind of saw the cover art to their All Passion, No Technique album, their debut album, and I thought it was interesting. I gave it a listen, and at the time, I had very mixed thoughts on it. On one hand, I thought that frontman Joe Casey was really just a shining star in modern post-punk, still do, and I liked the band's energy, but I thought that there was an album that was a little bit rough around the edges, and there was a lot of awkward moments as well, but I decided to stick around to see what they did next, and I'm glad that I did. With their next album, Under Cover of Official Right, they turned things up all around. This is a vicious album. This is a much darker and grimmer album. I mean, I saw them perform live at a festival around this time at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and literally people were flooded to see them halfway through the set because they were killing it so damn much, and they've only grown since. I mean, if I wasn't already singing the band's praises, I became an overnight mega fan with the Agent Intellect. I mean, this album is just so good. This is a modern masterpiece in art punk and post-punk. The very wordy, verbose verses and the very impending doom instrumentals that just seemed to show up in the middle of the fall years ago just to make things a little bit chillier, a little bit colder. And I was all for it. And I still, to this day, believe that Relatives in Descent is their best album. It is their most complete album. It is their most concise album. It is the album with the least filler, and it has a whole lot. It has just a whole lot of different styles of the band, whether it be the very pensive, intense, incredibly dark side of Protomartyr with tracks like A Private Understanding, or some of their more accessible tracks like Mail Plague or Don't Go to Anaceta. Now, the last time we heard from them was back in 2020 with the Ultimate Success Today album, and I thought it was okay. Thought it was decent. I thought it was a good album, and it had definitely some interesting elements to it. For one, this was by far their artsiest album. This was the album that showed Protomartyr taking the most risks, which was fine, but I kind of, at the end of the day, saw myself looking at it and saying, I hope that they come back with something a lot darker. I hope they come back with something a lot heavier and a lot more intense as well. And the singles leading up to this thing, I mean, I could not have been more excited for this album. I couldn't. And listening to it, yeah, they certainly did come out with that darker and grittier album. Make Way, this album starts off with Make Way. I mean, my God, I'm not even going to front. This track, since it dropped as a single, has done nothing but excite me. It's got this very mysterious, thick atmosphere and almost an element of Southern Gothic to it, which is just something that I will eat up like it's my job any day of the damn week. But the very pensive, thick verses and this just freak out of a chorus. It's just so good. And outside that, we get bluesy slide guitars, this very gritty riff. This is all around a exciting new direction for the band, and a great single and a great start. Then we have For Tomorrow, which is a much more direct, intense, throttling track. Winding riffs, crashing drums, intense vocal passages. This is very the Agent Intellect. It's just such a streamlined, focused sound for the band. It's got some interesting twists too. The synths that are floating through the background, that to me adds that little artsy twist that Ultimate Success Today tried so hard, and it does it a lot more seamlessly. It's just constant energy, breakdown after breakdown. And Elimination dances I love as well. This is definitely one of the more pensive tracks here. This track creeps along very slowly. Joe Casey is completely in control of this track. I mean, his performance is easily one of his most haunted, but also weirdly animated here. And outside that, we get a winding riff and crashing drums. It's great. It's a jagged, artsy, effective tune that just speaks to me so much. Like, this is exactly where I wanted to hear this album. I do really love Fun in High School as well. I mean, somehow this track is even more tense. I feel like this album as a whole is just this winding ball of anxiety that's just ready to blow at any moment. And yes, that's a big compliment. And Joe Casey's performance, once again, it's so aggressive for him. I love it. And between the tortured and disturbed atmosphere that we get here, this track is nothing short of a feast for modern art punk and post-punk heads. And that final release where we get a lot more of a noisy rip, it's almost euphoric. And let's tip the creator. I love how bulky and genuinely heavy this track is. It just swirls around you, encapsulates you, suffocating you. But the sense of mystery and surreal imagery on this track and this album as a whole continues to be a major selling point. And I love how they add just a small human element to make this just come off genuinely tortured. Now, there are a few weak moments here. Thankfully, not too many at all, but Grap vs. Host is definitely one of them. This is one of the most pensive and atmospheric tunes here, and that excited the hell out of me because this track is thick with like 10 C's. But outside of some really fantastic drum fills, I don't think Protomartyr really capitalized on it. Yeah, a lot of this track is just the band not following suit, especially Joe's vocal performances, which is easily some of his most phoned in here. And the author is really not much better. This track is a jumbled mess of an instrumental at the end of the day. I mean, this is easily the most noisiest and most chaotic track on this entire album, but it's a jumbled mess of thoughts. It sounds like 18 different ideas crashing into one another, which sounds exciting in practice, but it's really not. Outside of that, though, you see this? This is a happy boy. We have 3,800 Tigers. I don't know how we got here, but I love that we are here. This track has a weird, off-kilter, funky bass lick that I did not expect. And I expected it even less to work to the band's advantage as much as it does. It really does work. I mean, throw in some crashing guitars and intense drums and another really great, compelling performance from Joe Casey, you have a great track. It ends up being the most intense track here. Polacrilex Kid, honestly, it's the single that took me the longest to really grow on, but it certainly has. I mean, it's one of the less flashy and much more patient tunes on this album, which is not going to be for everyone. But it's all a build up to this very noisy, once again, euphoric chorus that's actually pretty intense. Fulfillment Center, this may be the heaviest track on the entire album. It's noisy, it's chaotic, but it's also a controlled chaos. It just sounds so dangerous. It's one of the shortest tracks in, but Protomartyr just sticks so much into it, and by the end of the track, it's easily the most raw moment here. We know the Rats practically shows Protomartyr dipping into some shoegaze elements, as this track definitely has like a very dreamlike, surreal filter to it. But it's just as hazy and intense, and the band follows suit. They really do hop on this train and do great with it. It's got some great background chanting, as well as moments of peace that really do mix things up a little. It's a very compelling track and a really great sound for the artsier side of Protomartyr. And Rain Garden, where did this even come from as a finale? This is an intense, harrowed, dramatic finale. Wailing guitars, the freaking crashing drums that we get here. Joe's performance, which is his most tortured and human here. I wanted this album to be grittier and darker, and we certainly get it here. And as tremendous as this track is all around, it's once again the human element of this track that really just nails it in the coffin for me. I think it's my favorite deep cut here. And you know what? It's almost 6 minutes. This is by far the longest track here, but it is worth it. I mean, Protomartyr really brought their A game on this album. I was worried that they were going to go for an artsier sound after their last album, Ultimate Success Today. But this is a much more gritty, intense, surreal, haunted, and most importantly, heavier album all around. I mean, the band's taking some risks, sticking to their initial style, but bringing in some new flavors. And honestly, I'm really excited by a lot of them. And no, I don't think it's their best album. I still think Relatives and Descent is a little bit better. But this is an exciting turn for the band. This, in almost every aspect, is exactly what I wanted to hear. I'm feeling a strong 8 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.